Welcome to the Heroes of Reality podcast, a podcast about the game of life and the hero's journey we all experience. Let's jump in with our host, Dylan Watkins, as he introduces today's guest.
Good morning, young adventurers. Dylan here. On today's podcast, I interview Vangelis Lympouridas. He is a whole-body interaction XR designer. He teaches XR, which is both AR and VR interaction design at the School of Engineering for USC. He's also the Chief Design Officer for Applied VR, a medical VR company that is FDA approved to treat VR therapy. And so we have a deep, wide-ranging conversation on XR, on mentorship, on critical thinking. What does it take for young designers to be able to design things, not just pass along instructions, make something red or blue, but how to critically think, to take information in, cognitively think about it, and output something that is part them and part applied science. On top of that, we go deep into the vagus nerves, the meaning of that, the how we can all connect as a society and civilization. And it was a wide-ranging and wonderful talk. If you're in the areas of VR design or XR design, and you want to learn how to level up your skills, I highly recommend this podcast. So without any further ado, I would like to present Vangelis.
Hey, Vangelis, how you doing, buddy?
All right, there we go. That worked.
It worked. We're connected. Oh, man.
That's good.
I know the whole meetings with Zoom and everything. It's like some people are knocking on the door and you can't tell. And you're like, I wonder where they are.
Is that a real background?
That is a real background. That's real.
Nice.
And
Mine too.
You're just holding on the outside of a rocket ship, just flying through space. No, I'm in New Orleans, so it's a lot of concrete and stuff going on.
Nice. New Orleans,
Yeah.
huh? Perfect.
Yeah, it's good times. VR stuff. How you been, brother? What's new with you?
What's new is that I just finished the course at USC, so I'm better. You know.
You just finished the course?
Yeah, because I've been teaching the whole semester, and that's the most exciting news. I'm done with it for the semester. So, it's good. But yeah, I've been doing great. Being stealth, working remotely, we're privileged. We can work remotely. And there's a lot of movement around because everyone is thinking about innovation and R&D, and COVID was a big booster for telehealth and digital health. So, I'm working a lot in the domain. The product that I designed for Applied VR got breakthrough designation at FDA as a breakthrough device. So we have the first virtual reality therapy that is going out there, and more will follow. But to put in your story that you designed the first breakthrough device delivering VR therapeutics through FDA, it's a big thing. So I'm very grateful.
Congratulations
For the thanks.
That's awesome.
All the work we've done at Applied, and there's a lot more to come.
That's incredible.
Some other companies now. I'm working also with Europe, the European Union, and EIC, which is the big organization that funds a lot of research and startups in Europe. There's a lot of interest in VR also in Europe, and in general innovation. I think that has globalization kind of pulled back, and national states, and new wave of nationalism to the degree that is not dangerous, but just competitive in terms of technologies and innovation. There's a lot of stimulation now that governments are putting in for innovation. Everyone is boosting funding. They give incentives for people to move to the countries and start companies and all that. I've been working with the UK government as well. They have a very aggressive plan for attracting companies from the US to move into UK or start chapters in the UK. The same for Europe. The same for Switzerland. So it's a new world where for a little while there will be a huge boost in innovation. Then the doors will close, and then we'll see. Will we go to globalization 2.0? Well, we'll roll back to the caves. We'll see.
It's so funny. Us being in the world of virtual reality development and all that fun stuff. I mean, it basically overnight, virtual reality went from the vitamin to a pain pill. Or went from it's a nice idea to no, we need it, and we need it like yesterday. So then the influx of capital to try to make up the excess speed, all that fun stuff. So that's incredible. In terms of just kind of take a step back, could you kind of say just a little bit of kind of what you do in the world of VR and kind of your role in all that?
Sure. Yeah. I like to think that I'm more of a native in virtual reality in the XR, because I had the privilege to work academically in the domain before VR became a thing for the masses at this at least last wave of virtual reality. For me and for us at the USC, that we had that privilege to work in virtual reality for some years. There was, and also other academics and everywhere around the world that worked in previous waves of virtual reality. There was no novelty in the medium. We didn't think like, oh my God, this new thing that came out, and let's find out how it works, and let's try and see what works and what doesn't. We already knew a little bit of what works and what doesn't, and we wanted a solid hardware platform and software integration to explore actually productization of virtual reality, existing research and existing things into into services. So that's what happened, with all this new wave of virtual reality. We had the luxury to enjoy platforms that they're solid at this moment. They're not ideal, but at least they're reliable, they're scalable, they're getting better year by year. Even thinking that this new wave is 6 years old, and to see the progress within these 6 years is very assertive about the future and what's going to come. So I came to virtual reality from an academic standpoint, and then I moved into the industry. I founded my company, and then I worked in various XR projects across disciplines. Got back into USC 3 years ago at the Daewoo School of Engineering, now not the School of Cinematic Arts that I used to be, and started teaching AR, VR, and mixed reality as a class for graduate students in computer science. And through that, I'm running around 90 students a semester, and anywhere from 12 to 15 projects, half of them games, and the other applications across different industry applications and industry verticals and use cases. So
That's awesome. It's interesting. You can always see the trickle down effect from primarily military applications like the internet, then it goes into university applications, and then it trickles down into consumers and all the way out down to mainstream. And what you're talking about is actually bringing it from the sciences to actually applied sciences, where you can actually take it and commercialize it. But you couldn't really do that. I mean, even just the 5-6 years that I've been in virtual reality, the headsets that we originally were using, it was $3,000 for a laptop and a headset and external cameras and all that fun stuff. Now you trickle that down to a $300 headset that's as good, if not better, that you can pop up and set up in 5 minutes versus all the bells and whistles that it took to get it going. So that widening the gap for being able to have anybody, it really lowers the touch, because you're right, the overall effectiveness of VR, being able to look around in the space, all those things are a lot of knowns. but actually being able to have mass adoption to where it actually makes business, economical,
The
fiscal
scalable
sense.
thing. Mhm.
That's the thing that, like, the way I always describe it, it's almost like being in the VR space for a number of years. It's like you're a VR developer, a designer, and you're building a town in the desert saying the trains are coming. At one time, it's going to be Main Street. It's going to be here. You're just building it up, right? And finally now, especially with COVID, it came. You're like, oh, well, now we're ready. Now let's jump into the space, which is really incredible. The the main area that you focus in, though, is primary medical tech. Is that the main area? Is applied medical applications, or?
Yeah, absolutely. That's where I focus in the past years. I'm doing also some things in other areas, but I think
Hmm.
medical is a viable business at the moment. Lots to offer with so many applications across XR, so many different business models, very scientific and evidence based, and a great opportunity both from business but also from an innovation standpoint, to bring things to light that are innovative but also for the good of humanity. So
Hmm.
I've been doing that primarily because of my background at USC and the connection with the Creative Media Behavioral Health Center and lab that primarily explore the power of media into digital health, diagnostics, and therapeutics, rather than purely the engineering or I don't know, the science of that. In order
Hmm.
to produce digital health, and especially in XR and all that, you have to have this media component and the fusion of design and art to embrace the scientific evidence and the technology to
Hmm.
create things that actually people are using, and you drive the medicine, let's say, with the non-active ingredient of entertainment, and I'm generalizing here, but just for the sake of the argument, I think that was something that was identified by the founder of the Creative Media Behavioral Health Center at the Interactive Media Division of the Cinema School at USC almost 15 years ago. Professor Gotsis, the visionary in the field, assessed what was happening at the time and realized that most of the people that were using digital media to do digital therapeutics, they weren't tapping into media. They were just doctors working with engineers or lawmakers and this and that, and then so designers weren't in the mix, artists weren't in the mix. And that was the whole endeavor there to connect the dots and really deliver well-rounded solutions. And I've been working with Valentina Gotsis for the past 10 years at USC. We started in 2010 with a intervention for paraplegics. Uh, and then, throughout the years, she mentored me in so many other areas. So when I worked out, being an expert in VR and XR, I also had, a lot of expertise in designing therapeutics and diagnostics and being mindful on how you're doing it and what are the core principles, and actually practice it to a degree that bear fruits. And as I mentioned, we now have the first breakthrough device designation for a VR therapeutic for chronic pain management.
That's awesome. Yeah, the really understanding that VR is kind of a pinnacle of interdisciplinary design, where
Mhm.
it's not just engineers and artists, and it could be storytellers. But one of the best things about the space is that everybody can come with their tool belt, right? And they go, "Hey, I've got a hammer. What can I do? Hey, what are you? You're an engineer? That way. Artist? That way." Everybody, and even subject matter experts in any of the spaces. I mean, because you're more or less taking your reality and you're stacking your reality on this virtual reality and going, okay, what works inside the physical space? Well, how do we make it better inside the virtual space? And so many people can come into the environmentals and actually stack upon it. A couple of the challenges that you touched on that I think is a really good point, and then I'll dive into what you worked on, is one of the things I think is really interesting is you're talking about going into an actual space for people that actually use something. A lot of times when people put on VR, their mind gets blown. They're like, this is great. This is so fun. Oh my God, I could, and they just start building things. But people have been building VR for a number of years, designing and developing it. One of the first questions we ask is, why VR? Why do it here at all? Why not do it a mobile app, or why not do anything else besides this? Because sometimes you can start building because it's shiny and you realize that this may not be actually useful at all, right? And you're like, no, right? And so people stepping into the medical space, the reason why it's so useful is because of all the reasons of why you use virtual reality, right? Because is it rare? Is it risky? Is it expensive? Is it difficult, right? All those reasons are reasons why you should do it. And if you look at medical, the medical industry, it usually ticks all those buckets. And so stepping into the medical field, as well as not only being highly profitable and purpose driven, it kind of ticks all the buckets to be a very good place to kind of step first in space versus, I don't know, just the augmented reality shoe matching app or
Yeah,
something
sure.
that does that. So that makes a lot of sense. Would it love to curious is like, tell me a journey about making the first FDA approved therapeutic product for VR. What was that like? Like what was the first threshold guardian that kicked the crap out of you? I'd love to learn a little bit more about that journey.
I don't know how much I can disclose, but it was an exciting
whatever you feel comfortable
journey.
with. Let's get
Sure.
that.
No, it's like a lot of things are public. So I joined Applied VR 3 years ago as the chief design officer to oversee the design of these new therapeutics that the company wanted to offer. We focus on chronic pain, but we explore a wide range of applications. We've done prototypes, and I was running R&D and eventually product and R&D as we were scaling up. When I joined, we were like, I don't know, 7, 8 people. It was a small company. Post Series A, we grew up to 50. So it was exciting to see also, from the startup standpoint, how the journey of a startup and the people within that the early innovators kind of grow, and the parallel stories that are there within the company, within the product. When it comes to the product, it's like when you are doing R&D and innovation, the sky is the limit. You never say no. It's like, can we do that? It's like, yeah, sure. Let me have a look.
Figure it out.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. So one thing that characterized this effort was the sense of care and compassion. How empathic you had to be towards developing the virtual reality therapeutic for chronic pain. It's like people are seriously in pain, in trouble, and that affects their mood, they affect their sleep and all that. So we didn't come like here into this that, oh yeah, we're just going to put them in VR suddenly and we'll solve the problem. And we started thinking more about the how to open a window of opportunity for them to absorb and learn new skills. So it was all driven by psychoeducation and principles of psychotherapy and psychology. A lot of integration with biosensing and be driven by breath, which was for us the main component of relaxation and the engagement of the parasympathetic system and all that for the patient to find some immediate relief, and through the immediate relief to open a window of opportunity to absorbing these new ways of managing their pain and all that. So we got, really like in a way to be in at the right time where America was getting into a point of understanding that opioids and it's not the solution. We were talking about the opioid crisis, and that was also a booster into what we're proposing here. Back in 1980s, the NIH proposed mindfulness and breathing exercises and meditation and all that as a viable solution to chronic pain. And what we've seen from that was exactly the opposite. So to bring that, because everyone that went for the cheap, dirty solution of an opioid. So instead of investing in long-term behavioral interventions and psychologically driven, interventions that take time and effort, people gravitated into the cheap fix with a pill that creates, way more problems down the road. So although we had this argumentation in the 1980s, we spent 30 years creating this tremendous problem with opioids in the United States, with thousands and thousands of people dying every year from overdosing, from all kinds of complications. So tackling this problem with virtual reality was exciting also for investors. We successfully closed the Series A and moved into working with the FDA and doing clinical trials and testing the product in iterative ways to land into something that when the last clinical study came out, and that will offered as in the product, the breakthrough device designation proves more than 35% reduction in pain, but the most important thing was like improvement in mood, more than 40% improvement in mood, more than 45% improvement in sleep. So other things that we foresaw that they're going to be critical components into pain management. So we weren't just looking into pain, but how if we improve your sleep, then the next day you'll sense less pain because now your system won't be aroused because of the lack of sleep. So how you create something that, it's a combination of a lot of things that point you towards quality of life and better outcomes, managing your condition rather than be fixated in one metric.
Yeah, and one thing you really touched on, well, there's a couple things there. One, you're talking about creating a positive feedback loop, right? So you get better sleep, you have a better mood, you have, you that whole thing kind of spirals up versus spiraling down, which is the opposite effect when you take opioids or things like that. I mean, but it's that tried and true. There's I don't know, some sort of ancient quote that I'm going to butcher to a degree. It goes, well, you could take the journey around 1,000 miles to get to across the river, or the ferry boat's a nickel, right? And so the problem is that everyone just takes that pill, they go across the way, but they don't understand the destructive effects that they have because there's diminishing returns over time. And it's just it's just so much easier to take a pill, and that's why people do it. It's just we're inherently lazy, but we want the results, and so that's kind of the problem with that. One thing I think is really interesting, I mean, whether it's VR or not VR, but an area I'd love to talk about before we get into the threshold guardian bits is your vagus nerve, right? So you're talking about your sympathetic for your parasympathetic nerves. I'm really fascinated with the vagus nerve because it's one of those things that, people think that we're thinking machines that feel, but we're really feeling machines that think, right? And we basically created this prefrontal cortex as a way to figure out our environments to really serve our reptilian brain, our limbic systems, our vagal nerves and stuff like that. And if you think about the vagus nerve, it's a very interesting organ that's connected to the eyes, that's connected to the lungs, that's connected to the heart, the stomachs, all the way down the body. That is really how you feel is an association. And the one connection across that whole thing is breathing and being able to control your breathing. They think it's an autonomic nerve response, but in reality, you can actually control it if you're willing to climb the mountain. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I'm willing to bet you have.
Sure. And if I knew that you knew so much, I will hire you. because a lot of the research that I conducted there had to do with the vagus nerve and how it works, and it's a very complicated mechanism, and still it's under research, and we're trying to find out exactly how it informs the brain, and what is the negotiation between the organs and the brain. And breathing, and the diaphragmatic breathing is one of the best ways to modulate the vagus nerve. Another way is electric stimulation. So again, you have this paradigm that, well, there are natural ways of doing something, and then there are artificial ones, and maybe the artificial, it's easier, so we should go with the easy fix rather than create the skills acquired.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that eventually humanity needs to battle. The easy solutions, and do they have to be easy? Do you have to be a hero in your everyday journey, or just be lazy and always go for the easiest
One of the things, like, we respect the heroes because of the effort we put in, but we don't want to put in the effort. But at the same time, we want to view ourselves as a hero. But then by constantly taking the easy path, you view yourself, you label yourself as either victim and someone who's not heroic, which allows you that stops you from actually taking those heroic steps. But that's that balance of being a human, right? We want to be a hero, but we want the easy path. But we respect the hero, and that's the drama that unfolds. What's interesting to me is that, I feel like there's entry points all along the vagus nerve that you can actually induce positivity, or switch it from sympathetic to parasympathetic, as they say. And so you're looking at that. Whether it's at the eyes with the EDMR, or the breathing and going through there, or mindfulness at the top. There's lots of spots, I think, along, or just your gut. If you want to jack up your vagus nerve, just eat a whole bunch of sugar, right? Just start dumping it in your system. And watch how it responds. So I think there's just different touch points throughout the system that you can kind of tap into it. Very much how your physiology affects your psychology, and your psychology affects your physiology. So it's actually a two-way street. While most people think it's one directional, it's actually both lanes. And I think along the big point, you go through it. So,
and also it's like the false paradigm that the brain's a computer. It's like, well, it's a living organism. And memories are not stored in 0 and 1. There's emotional memory with the event memory, everything. And that, for example, lead us in new therapeutics for PTSD, and doing exposure therapy for phobias and all that. So virtual reality can play this role, and through the occupying your senses, whether it's the visual and auditory senses, olfactory or other, gets you in a control environment where now the neuroplasticity, the different modalities, including the cognitive, as well as the sensorial, can be in a way manipulated, but for the good. Now, of course, you can manipulate for bad, and it's yet to be proven, how we can eventually leverage virtual reality to do more good than bad.
Technology is a race between utopia and disaster with all technologies. A knife, bread,
archetypical,
as it goes,
battle.
Right? Yeah, but that's what a lot of the developers in this space, you go into the medical space first, have it, use this technology for good and feel good while you're doing it. You can use it for entertainment and sedation and repression and oppression and all that fun stuff. But, at the end of the day, it's just whatever. Technology is nothing more than the magnification of the human's intent and will. And hopefully the person who's using it is doing it for good, right? So I love the fact that they're using it for therapy and helping heal people, which I think is awesome. Along the way, if you can talk about it, what have been some of the things that you're talking about that have actually, that you've had some lesson learns or some difficult battles where as you're going through this, you were like, oh man, I don't know if I can make it through this round with this company. Anything that you're at liberty to say that's public information, because I would love to learn on some lessons or some insights that you're like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. And I'm going to learn that lesson either as a designer or in terms of developing the product itself.
That's an interesting one. Um, I think one of the biggest things that troubled me was the responsibility. It's like when you understand how sophisticated the brain is, and how naive at the same time, and how it's easy to trick how easy it is to trick the brain, and then you start designing around it, and you leverage things from psychology and all that. Suddenly you feel that you have a lot of power, and you start questioning, should I have all this power? So it's again, thing of the hero's journey, of how you are introduced to a new powerful weapon that you now have to perform with, and you are also growing with this power, and you're growing with all this responsibility, and that also opens up, to the degree that you are an ethical person, debates around ethics and what is ethical to do, and how it's you go about it. So I think a lot had to do with this realization, as we're becoming more and more, we're gaining more insights and expertise on how to do these things in virtual reality. And at the practical level, I think there are boring things that happen in every company, and especially in the startup world, with the growing pains and all that. What I used to say, and I can disclose that, is like it's good to apply the same therapeutics into the company, feeling that it's like it's an organism. So you can say that it's not acute pain, it's chronic pain. So we can put the same management techniques that we're asking people to do inside the company. So breathe in, breathe out.
It's so right, man. You're like, is this a systemic
on.
problem? Is this something that we have to dive deep in and actually, and from the inside? And it's true, like your brain is multiple systems working together in one functioning whole, right? Like a car, but you're talking about it as an actual company. And I completely agree, because sometimes you have like cognitive dissonance, where there's a separation in an organization where they don't understand, or there's an unsettling disagreement that you either ignore or you oppress or suppress, and then it doesn't allow it to function at optimum levels. And so I completely.
And if you bake cookies, that's fine. Disagree on how much sugar you put in the cookie, but
you just get a sweet cookie.
If you come now from medical science, meaning entertainment and technology, and then all kinds of other ingredients that nobody ever cooked with, and you're not even talking the same language, because you're dealing with scientists that they don't understand technology, and technology that don't understand media and business that tries to orchestrate things that they're coming from all these different backgrounds. It's challenging, and it's like great to have the experience and the exposure to this. Settings, for sure.
Yeah, it's almost like an ironic sitcom where you take different personality types and you bring them together. What happens when I take an artist and an engineer and I put them in the silent room, and I apply pressure on the outside forces, right? Like financial pressures and performance pressures and those other situations. You're like, let's see what happens when they crack. And then so but that's just, what's so funny is though, like, much like people, and we're talking about the hero's journey, and the hero's journey is nothing more than the evolution of one's potential, right? So you have an ordinary person, you put them in extraordinary situations, you give them ideally magical weapons, could be virtual reality or whatnot. They go through and they do battle against themselves. They have an ego death, and then they're reborn into a new character, right? Your company has the same thing. As you go through it, what worked at level 1 to level 20 employees does not work at level 20 to level 200 employees. And so you've got to find out how do you keep dying and getting reborn over and over again, because sometimes that ego death doesn't want to happen. And so someone's holding on to, the ordinary person when they need to go be extraordinary, and that just doesn't work unless they're doing it for
absolutely right.
a deeper reason, which is so difficult, brother. So what do you think is the, like, for you, I mean, for you as either as a designer in this space or as for the company itself, like, what's the cave that you fear to enter? Is there a place that is, that, like, you're like, oh, that looks interesting, but I don't know if I'm willing to go into that space?
Yeah.
Wow, I felt that, like, whoa, don't bring me in there. I don't want to go.
I'm afraid of boredom. It's like,
you're afraid of boredom?
Of boredom, of going somewhere where there isn't any challenge. It's like, oh my God, I hate that.
The grind.
It's like, as long as I'll never go that far to weaponize anything. It's like I feel that the primitive self or the primitive collective self is a self-interest of some. It's like I don't feel that there is merit in the fear of others. There are people that they're scared, and they're scared of their shadow, and then they're scared of the other, and this and that. But let's not make it a global I think that defines humanity. I think that's these are exceptions. It's as the more powerful to, I don't know, carry along narratives of fear and control rather than narratives of inclusivity and, education and, progress. Eventually, we might reach a point where the narrative of progress and inclusivity is much easier for people to embrace than the narrative of fear. But that requires a lot of education and new type of education. But to talk about this dark cave again, it's like everything that is boring, doing the same thing for no reason and all that. Take me out.
Yeah.
I prefer
you like the excitement. That's also could have been what appealed to you as a startup. The fact that it's new, that it's novel, it's extreme.
Absolutely.
You're going. So then, as the company scales,
more than that, please.
No, I was going to say, so as the company scales and things start to level off, and it more becomes boardroom meetings and that type of stuff, does that make you lose interest? Are you a perpetual startup person who wants to go and find the next exciting thing that pushes the boundaries?
That's why I landed again into innovation, structural innovation by design, transdisciplinary, looking in other areas to transfer my knowledge from medical, continue at the medical while, you know what I mean? It's like after a point I found myself, I'm like, I could start something, like I have my own startup and this and that, but it's like, but after a point, everything becomes like, how I'm going to sell, how I'm going to scale, how I'm going to this, which is more like boring to me, exciting for others. And I found myself more like, no, you're an inventor or an innovator. You are in the space of creating new. You're in the space of driving R&D, of productizing till the product is ready. But other than that, I think there are other people that, they're exceptional into leading companies and efforts past that point. And maybe these people cannot do structural R&D and low-level design, but that's why we're collaborating.
Yeah, no, it makes sense because you're just passing. Much what we were talking about the evolution of a company. What works at from 1 to 10 employees does not work from 10 to 100 employees. And so sometimes someone needs to go from the front seat to the back seat and say, all right, the torch is yours, keep running. This isn't my show, because there's the starters and there's the growers and the scalers, and that just that makes a lot of sense. One thing you touched on I thought was great, and it's one of those things that I wasn't expecting this. You're talking about more so around the areas of going for things out of things you hope to be true versus the things you fear to be true, and how you want to have more of teaching things around inclusivities versus exclusivities, abundance versus scarcity, and then how that will take a lot of education, because if you think about that, that doesn't happen till you kind of get up, like, Maslow hierarchy of needs with like enlightenment and all that stuff, because everyone starts in scarcity in terms of food, water, shelter. If you don't have those things, the only reason you're not going to be in there is because your parents paid the road, or some other way a system created a benefit to where you don't need to worry about those things. But as soon as if you want to see scarcity, go and take all the toilet paper from the local grocery store and watch everybody freak out because they can't wipe their butts. You know what I'm saying? It's a very low level issue that's like, really, it's not that big of a problem, but that
And we've been there, all of us.
we've all been there. We know that we're like, everyone's like, no, I don't think I need to go to the store. But then you see everyone else do it, and that wave of energy takes you, and then you get that like, oh no, it goes from we're all in this together, then it's all for myself. And how do you really teach that kind of, because you said it takes education, but how do you actually teach something like that? How do you educate people to create that abundant mindset? Like, would you do that in the world of VR, or what are your thoughts around that?
Excellent points. I think that's part of my mission and why I'm interested in putting my time into teaching this class at USC. Because it's challenging. I challenge myself on how to bring students that have no idea about VR, spatial computing, and mixed reality and all that, the general CS science graduate students, that they only write code in 2D, and suddenly you open the window and like, no, you actually can't be there. And along with that learning, you have to teach them about user-centered design, understand perception, understand, the power that they have in their hands, to be mindful of the decisions, to really drive them, into somewhere that they were never thought that they will end up when they said, oh, I want to write code, I want to become a computer scientist. So it's exciting for me to see how, along with the course, I'm teaching so many other things about collaboration, about ethics, about, things that these kids will never be exposed to. Human physiology, psychology, name it. And a big chunk of that work happens through mentorship. So the way I structure the class has a lot to do with mentorship, but also, the lectures that we give and all that. But when I compare the two, I think that students get more from the mentorship rather than the lectures. You go there, you preach, and you say, oh, this and that, and in VR, and place illusion, and plausibility illusion, la 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 la. It's like, okay. But they don't mean anything unless you put them in the context of their own work, when they point out what is going on in the environment or in the application, when they get into breakthrough innovations for themselves, when they take an idea and they make it in theirs. And of course, all the complications of running, I don't know, 10 teams. You like, some recruiter reads at some point, it's like, so what is the biggest team that you run? And at the time I was running, I don't know, I'd applied a team of, I would say 25, 30, something like that. I'm like, oh, this and that. And then I thought, of like, wait a minute, I ran 90 students at USC, because it's like, from the project management perspective, or from the management perspective, to run with professionals, it's easier than running students. And then you scale that to 90. I'm like, I ran 15 projects and 90 students. I can run a company twice as big as that, just because I'm dealing with professionals, just because the processes there that they're respected. And so as part of the mission for me, teaching is to create new ethos for these students, and a new understanding of the world through the technology, through the collaboration, through for those that know me, I'm very critical also of mainstream narratives. So I've been teaching the students how I had a very specific slide about Magic Leap, for example, and saying how this is not sustainable, how this is magical thinking. A lot of peers, over the years, because I was, critical of the amount of capital and how they are going to fail to deliver on specs because of this magical thinking and not taking a holistic approach in design and innovation and understanding that what are the limitations around the product. They thought that I was, I don't know, biased or this or that. I didn't, for some reason, like the company. It wasn't about that. It's about being pragmatic and being a scientist and, looking at the evidence and say, the evidence tell us this. And look at this and look at that. So I like to be provocative with my students, because it gets them outside the norm. Even if, I wasn't 100% true about everything I said about basically about the vision of Facebook to have everyone working in VR for, 8 hours? I don't know what they're thinking, but I make these cases, and I go to my students and I go, so what do you think about that? Will you work for 6 hours in VR and then meet your friends in VR? It's like, and suddenly they feel like from that the narrative doesn't make much sense. And for me, it's not about changing the narrative as well as challenging the narrative. You challenge it, and then it makes sense because the outcome will be like, oh yeah, it's a hybrid model where you have an easy in, easy out, as I call it, from virtual reality or other immersive technologies, and you use them in your reality workflow rather than create this imaginary world where everything happens in VR.
Well, you touched on a couple of points. And so, one of them is really cool. What it sounds like to me is you're a mentor. Obviously you mentor about 90 kids through the whole process, but if you look at the hero's journey, you've gone through the loop and had a holy grail and you've returned back to a local community to inspire other heroes along that journey, which is super cool because especially like trying to level up and be a designer where you're like, I'm just going to figure out how to be a VR designer. And they just like turn on a laptop and start Googling things. You can get so far, but really a real mentor not only teaches you the critical, I would say the technical skills, but also the life skills along the path, which is more than anything, how to think and then how to challenge thought process and how to challenge the mainstream norm concepts. Because going through, and I agree with the whole Magic Leap, they sold a vision, a wonderful fantasy vision. And it was like, oh my God, you can do that? Like with CGI, we can do anything, right? And that's how they did it, right? And they said, oh, we'll figure it out along the way. But you even touched on it earlier. You're like, well, we said we'd figure it out. And so, but there's a difference between stretching the boundaries of reality and snapping it entirely. Exactly. And because it's not true. But getting young ones to think about how do you think through a process, and especially as a designer, one of the things that being designers in the space and human-centric designers, because I consider myself to be a human-centric designer as well, is you really look at human patterns and loops. And when you make a new product, you say, oh, here's your actual loop in life, and then you insert your product in that loop and make that life better. I want to get from here to across the street or down the street. I'm going to call a friend. Well, why not use the thing like Lyft or Uber? So you're inserting loops on top of that versus complete fantasy models of I'm going to spend my entire life in VR. Well, maybe not. Maybe instead of you just trying to overhaul your entire life into the world of VR, what if you just took the most painful things like, I don't know, constructing 3D worlds and having to look at it on a 2D screen and saying, well, how about you build it however you build it, then you put on the headset and then you can view it, and it more or less adds value versus just trying to force feed a world of fantasy into someone's life that no one's going to adopt. You're not going to adopt that. Unless like, as you and me know, put on the headset for 8 hours. Let me know how you feel. At the end of that, how does your neck feel? How do you feel? Do you feel good at the end of that experience? Is it something that you're like, oh my God, I can't wait to go in again? Or are you just nauseous for the rest of the day? So touch on this point because it's a realistic, the thing with people that have like ideas and then, they look at products, the designers actually have to take those fantasies and turn them into realities, which means
At
you
least
have
the
a
good designers.
well, yeah, you're right. There's people that have made, I don't know, the pet rock or other things that are just a great marketing thing. But you're talking from a design human-centric standpoint, which is like, do you like looking at the human-centric design standpoint? I mean, do you have philosophies? Like if there's a young adventurer starting out to become a heroic designer on these paths, what messages would you give young designers starting out in this world, in this space that maybe is either uncommon or something that you feel is, ethos that you live by and principles of design?
Yeah, sure. I don't know. Many. But
Top.
I think that challenging assumptions is it's a good one to always have a critical thinking over things and be vocal. It's like don't be afraid to have a voice. uh, that's what I say to my students as well, that when you join these companies, you still have a voice, because that's also what will make you different than just be compliant. It's like, oh yeah, just give me the brief and I'll code it. It's like, but ask the question, is that the right thing to code here?
Yeah.
And I think to be always curious means that you should always be studious. So always to learn new things, and the more diverse the learning is and connect the dots, the better it is for the learner. Otherwise, you're just storing information the same way that, I don't know, a computer has a hard drive. But the real the real deal on a computer is not this hard drive; it's the processor. It's the ability to do things with information, not store the information. So that's how I became what I became. It's like it wasn't that I constantly had a vision of learning more and more and more, but understand what I'm learning and how it fits a narrative of another discipline. This whole thing of polymathy. And for me, it was an easier entry into that because with the cultural background of being Greek and all that, we were taught that philosophers were, polymaths. They knew physics and they knew mathematics, and they were studying this and they were studying that, and everything. The glue of it all was philosophy. So eventually this separation into disciplines didn't make any sense. It came with the Renaissance, or it came with some other constructs like the Industrial Revolution or whatever. Now, even in academia, we're thinking how to glue disciplines together again. Create these layers of polymathy and ask students to take other classes. There's the Bridge Institute at USC that is talking about the end of disciplines and all that. It took quite a while, but I think we're getting at a pivotal point where more and more we'll see this transdisciplinary kind of approach where the breadth of knowledge is better than the surgical deep knowledge of a domain. And it's not going to go away. It's just that we need to find a balance between the two.
100%. That makes a lot of sense. Just like a hub and spoke. You all hub together, go off and spoke in your own disciplines, come back together, but you need that, it's like, are you an individual or are you part of a community? Well, you're both, and you need
Exactly.
both, right? And so it's I always find that those truths are always it's a balance between, it's not one or the other, but the most truest truths are usually both, and that makes a lot of sense. And it seems like that also resonates with me when you're talking about how you're talking to designers on why you get them to challenge thinking, why you get them to challenge the thought process, because you're like, look, you're not just passing something along a chain where, oh, you want it red? I'll design it red. You want it blue? But you have a voice and you have a unique perspective and then life balance from all your histories and life lessons, whether you're coming from a Greek background or any other background, you're taking it and you're processing it as a human. And then you're saying, I see what you say, but let me add my own personality, my own flair. And I think that's when you take the skills and the disciplines of what does it mean to be a good designer, and then you throw your own flair on it, and thus you can actually be creative, which is what humans are meant to be, versus just, automatons processing bits, from A to B.
Exactly.
That's so beautiful.
Since you mentioned being Greek is not a nationality, it's a state of mind. So there wasn't anything back then that constituted a Greek nationality. Nationality came far later. Yeah, nothing. Absolutely nothing. It was all about the language and the philosophy. So it's like now we have the states, and we understand cultures, and we understand this and that. Before it wasn't like that. The idea of the nation, it's something that is contained, is enclosed. But the idea of cosmos is something that's integrated, is inclusive. So I have a dear friend that he's talking about cosmolocalism.
Cosmolocalism.
That the most important thing in the new century is to understand that the locality is what gives universality. But if you're talking about international, you're talking about the nations being interconnected, but they're enclosed. But the locality is, where people see themselves and their roles within the whole structure of the cosmos. So.
Got it. So I lost a beat for a second, but it cut out for half a second. But what it sounded like you said was a reflection on both. I am an individual, small little dust of sand, but I'm also connected to the cosmos at the same time. So recognizing both sides of those things at the same time really gives you the holistic view and the totality of who you are and how you fit in this world, which is a beautiful philosophy. Vangelis, how can people get a hold of you, reach out to you, connect with you if they want to learn more about who you are, what you do, and a little bit about your world?
Absolutely. The best thing is through LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I think emails these days, pass and go. A lot of people find me through LinkedIn. Most of the times I accept everyone. I'm not that active seeking contacts, but people come to me. I'm like, okay, cool. So I have a big community, but I never hunted for a big community. I'm rather say I'm not an extrovert. I'm not an evangelist to go out and preach about VR. I'm a critical thinker. But whoever wants, they can reach me at LinkedIn, send me a message, and I will definitely respond.
Beautiful. Thank you, Vangelis. This has been an awesome conversation. I really enjoyed it. I look forward to connecting soon, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
All right, brother. Have a great day.
I really enjoyed it too.
Me too. This was wonderful. Take care, brother.
Nice
Bye now.
Bye.
You too. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes of Reality podcast. Check out heroesofreality.com for more episodes. While you're there, you can also take the Heroes quiz to find out what kind of hero you are. Or, if you have a great story and want to be on the podcast, tell us why your hero's journey will inspire others. Thank you for listening. See you on the other side.